Charles.
Present.
Commissioner Weipert is running late. I don't know why this is going on here. One moment, please. Markham.
I'm here.
Cavell.
Here.
Spiz.
Present.
Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Thank you. Well, still stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We need a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Spiz, second by Commissioner Charles. We have a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Now we'll have public comment. Anybody from the public would like to speak to the committee? Anyone? Anyone? I always wanted to say that. Bueller. Hearing none, we'll call public comment closed. We have no communications today. We'll start with our first agenda item, facility management, facility planning, and engineering, Sheriff's Office jail carport project. Need a motion? Moved by Commissioner Charles, second by Commissioner Markham. Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleasure to see you guys again.
Again, yes, thank you for the special meeting. So I believe everyone was present last week for the meeting, so hopefully you're still familiar with this resolution, but it is to construct a carport that will accommodate 4 Sheriff's Office vehicles in the north parking lot of the jail. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. I know that last meeting we talked about, the additional funding which we've identified as available in the miscellaneous line of the CIP.
Any questions, any discussion?
Just,
Commissioner
so just
Smith.
as an update for everybody, anybody watching TV, the project cost for 4 is $74,770. Is that correct?
Correct, yep. And when we looked at, the base bid for the 2 was just over 50,000, 51,000.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I just say that I appreciate the committee here as a whole making the decision. The last committee meeting, it makes sense to go forward with this small amount to make 4 instead of 2. It'd probably cost more if we were going to do this later on. So appreciate the committee's due diligence on that. No other discussion, we'll call the roll, please.
Charles.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Cavell.
Yes.
Spiz.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
You have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
I'll vote yea.
Oh, okay. 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Next agenda item, we have facilities management, facilities planning, and engineering, Sheriff's Office emergency management feasibility study for new Sheriff's Operations Center, Oakland County Emergency Operations Center, Sheriff's Office Training Center, and Strategic Storage Facility. Need a motion. Moved by Commissioner Spiz, seconded by Chairman Commissioner Woodward. For discussion, he says. All right. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning. How are you?
Pretty good yourself?
Hey, best day of my life.
Outstanding.
So I'll just introduce, I guess, the resolution. This is for a feasibility study for the Sheriff's Office 911 Dispatch Center, Emergency Management Operations Center, as well as the Sheriff's Office Training Center, and also a strategic storage facility. So with that, anyone that would like to, I know that the resolution and the information provided explained in detail the needs for the facilities, but I didn't know if anybody wanted to start with some information on the need.
All right.
Sure, I can give you, I'm Captain Larry Perry from the Sheriff's Office. I'm in charge of our training division. our ERP, Emergency Response Preparedness, our SWAT team. I can give you a little background about our training facilities and where we're at, and a little bit of history on our training division. Recently, with the advent of COVID, we had strategically been placed all over the campus and off campus to try to achieve our training goals. We had retrofitted our Brown Road facility, which was our former boot camp program, when the program was shut down and the Frank Grennan facility was shut. We retrofitted those buildings in order to accomplish some of our training goals and needs. They were very run-down facilities and very hard to maintain because they were off-site. Strategically, it was hard for us to logistically support those buildings with training because we constantly had to move equipment out to the facilities and back off-site. Recently, due to COVID, we had to relocate. We were scrambling because of the commissioners were looking at possibly housing homeless subjects out there. So they had came in, did a review of the site, they found mold. It was not a viable site for them. It was not viable for us to be able to train there any longer. So we were scrambling for a training facility. Fortunately, through Mr. Zakos, we were able to locate a school that had been closed in Brandon Township. We are currently running that facility temporarily. Due to COVID, the owner of the building was not able to develop the property the way that he wanted to. He originally purchased the property to take and turn it into a community center for the residents of Brandon Township. So we were able to, the timing was right for us. We had to be off of a site and then into the new site within a weekend. So we were able to facilitate that and make that happen, and that's where we're currently at right now. We're using an old school, it was a former Brandon High School, middle school. We've been able to retrofit it to meet some of our training needs as far as classroom instruction and things along those lines. Like I said earlier, we have been hodgepodged all over the place. We had our training rooms initially were set up in the basement of the jail. We were doing a lot of our simulations and entry, like room clearing, active shooter response stuff at our Brown Road facility. We were also using, for our emergency vehicle operations, our pursuit intervention training that we use for the vehicles to stop pursuits, high-speed pursuits from occurring. We've been at the airport. We have been at the old mall parking lot. And most recently, right now, we were at Schoolcraft College renting their skid pad in order to perform that training. One of the things that the sheriff has done, and he's always been very proactive with the other agencies within the county, as far as providing training, he allows outside agencies to train with us, or we will even train the outside agencies. We have, over the years, with our driving instructional training, we've trained Southfield PD about 3 years ago with PIT training and EVO training, emergency vehicle operations, Sylvan Lake, Kegel Harbor, our NET team, which involves officers from all over the county that are involved with our narcotics enforcement division, with our team that we have. All of those drivers are trained and certified in these techniques to reduce liability. As recently as this year, we've been approached by West Bloomfield, Farmington Hills, and Auburn Hills to take in and instruct their officers in these emergency vehicle operations and PIT techniques. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it because we just don't have the facilities to do it. The sheriff, when we train these other agencies, it's at no cost. The sheriff never charges any of the other agencies. Since we've stood up the training facility on Brown Road, or from Brown Road transition to the school in Brandon Township, we conducted several types of training out there. The sheriff, we have a training consortium here in Oakland County called OAKTAC, and it's made up of all of the law enforcement agencies in the county. For years, we have struggled to find training locations for OAKTAC to do active shooter response. We've looked, it's always been limited to old schools that were in the off season, so we would take and try to have to crash course all these guys through these schools as they were available. Since we've had this facility, Oak Tech has been out there and trained at least 2 days a week with all of the different agencies within the county, at least 2 times a week up until this point. They're doing active shooter response, they're doing threat mitigation, using the classroom for instruction, the different classrooms that we have out there for different types of instructional things. Waterford Police Department was recently out and used, in one of the areas of the school, we've been able to retrofit with movable walls that we built and build a shoot house to simulate doing entry work and room clearing and things like that. Waterford Police Department, over the course of the last 2 months, has trained their entire department out there on how to clear rooms and buildings. So if they're doing, excuse me, building searches, or they have an open door response where they have to go check a residence, so they've been able to use that site to train their officers. Our range facilities are in the main jail and in the basement, so another location that we're trying to balance. The range was built in 1972 when the jail was built. It has 5 lanes. It was designed for when the department had 150 officers. Right now, on a monthly basis, just our own agency, we train approximately 900 officers with firearms. We also train outside agencies, such as Keego Harbor, Keego Harbor, Sylvan Lake. Smaller agencies, they use our range. They come in, and our range masters will qualify them at no charge for their agencies. But there's several other agencies that use it. The Postal Service, the Postmaster's Office uses it for certification for their officers. Treasury Department, sometimes, once in a while, the federal agencies, the FBI or Marshals will come in and use it. Additionally, the federal agencies have been in and used the facility up in Brandon for the entry technique and room clearance things that we're doing up there. We were also approached just recently by the Brandon Township Fire Department as far as using the site, excuse me, as far as using the site to simulate fire extrication and navigation in a smoke environment, which we're 110% on board with. You know, as long as we can schedule it, they can use the facility. Since the range was built in 1972, and over the last 15 years, the sheriff has implemented a patrol rifle program for all of our officers to be certified with a patrol rifle to be able to respond to critical incidents. We have no outdoor ranges. We have no indoor ranges that accommodate the rifles for qualification, so we have to lease one of the area gun ranges in order to do that training. Right now, we have a group of lateral hires that have come in. They are out at the range, out at the Detroit Sportsman's Congress, over right on the border of Rochester Hills and Shelby Township. They're training today and this week to become patrol rifle certified. It costs us $500 a day to use that range. So, we are renting that facility, as I stated, in Brandon Township, and it's costing us $144,000 annually in order to rent that facility. Plus, we're paying for utilities, we're paying for other amenities there to operate the facility, such as we're reimbursing the property owner $36,000 a year for utilities. We had to put in a security system, $3,200 cost for us. In order for us to hook up to the internet for the county website, for the county mainframe, it cost us $21,000 in order to do that. But the training that we're doing there, we're running our own corrections academies. We're not sending them out to another agency. We're running them in-house. We have agencies, other sheriff's offices within the state that send their officers to us to attend our corrections academy. We're currently running a corrections academy right now with 4 officers that are from St. Clair County. But we've had deputies from Grand Traverse, from Monroe, and other county sheriff's offices that have sent their deputies here to be trained. it's always been a challenge because of the different components that we have to do and the logistics that go behind it. One of the key components to this training center concept is being able to have a site, as I mentioned about, for emergency vehicle operations, a skid pad. Ultimately, the state police, they have a 1.5 mile road track. I don't know if they'll be able to do that on that site, but that would be part of the recommendation, so that for the emergency vehicle operations, it's kind of a critical piece and component to it. But the skid pad and the emergency vehicle operations are huge. Not only the sheriff has a very large motor unit, one of the largest motor units in the state with the motorcycles. Several of the agencies within the county also have motor units, and our instructors, our master instructors, train those guys as well. So this facility, while it's going to benefit the sheriff's office, the sheriff has looked at a regional concept with this, that all of the agencies within the county would be able to use it and be able to utilize it to train their officers. That's about all I have. Do you have any questions?
Any discussion?
I mean, I think,
Commissioner Woodward.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I've got a number of questions like, on this proposal, on this resolution, but I mean, since we're specific, I mean, this, I think, was speaking more specifically about the training component of all of this. When we, oh my, when we provide training to outside agencies, do they pay for the use of that training? So we bear the full cost of all that training?
The sheriff does, sir.
Do we train like state police or
No, not
other?
the state police. They have their own training facility and their own training complex.
Do, you mentioned something like St. Clair and other, when these agencies come in, do they pay for it or do we pay for them as well?
No, we take care of all that.
We take care of all that. So we're bearing the full cost of all the training that's,
If I could just go, it's at no additional cost to us because we already have the academy in place. We're the only state certified academy. So we do allow them to come in, but it doesn't cost us anything
Right.
more.
well, the reason I'm asking, and I think, you know, it sounds great, except, I mean, in order to sustain these trainings, and I think this is a question, and I mean, ultimately, I read today that, I mean, the proposal, I mean, if we were going to go forward in building 1, 2, 3 buildings, we're looking at $88 million is the number that I read in the newspaper, with no revenue stream to pay for it. So what is the rationale? I mean, we all support training. We understand training is important. What's the rationale that there isn't an expectation that other agencies that are, I mean, we have our fiduciary responsibility to our men and women in uniform. And the taxpayers we serve, to train them to have the best officers out there on the streets. What's the rationale for not entering into some sort of agreement to share in the cost of what it costs to provide this training?
That's very good, and I can answer that, sir. That's a very good question. For the local Oakland County police agencies, we would not charge them because these are county tax dollars. We will look at a model, if this becomes a regional facility, to say charge the federal government or other outside agencies and establish some sort of revenue stream for that. We're not opposed to that, and your question's a very good one. Currently, there's a very limited amount that use it because we have to take care of ourselves first. So if it is built, they will come, and if they come and they're outside of Oakland County, we definitely will look at a model for reimbursement.
Right. Well, along this, and I remember having conversations with the past administration specifically around this. I mean, do we have some demonstration to that question that if it's built, they will come? I mean, have we asked agencies to say yes? Not only would we come, but we're also willing to, contribute, because they too, I can't think of any law enforcement agency that doesn't put a premium, particularly in this moment in history, on training, that wouldn't agree to it. Have we done the outreach to have that level of support? Not just like, yeah, we would like you to build it and then we'll use it for free, but like, yes. I mean, we are committed. We are committed to using this. And
Yes, sir.
I think, well, just before you answer, I bring it up in the context of OCC building a training facility and everything, and it's not utilized. It was a complete. I mean, I'm not gonna say it was a failure. It just, we built a structure to be able to do these things. That for whatever reason, people said, you know what, we'll achieve our training in a different way. And so that is, I mean, in terms of thinking big picture, this build it and they will come mentality gives me a little bit of pause because we have evidence in which we built it and they didn't come.
Totally understand. The OCC facility and the major or the captain can address that. It does not meet the needs of the Oakland County law enforcement in general. It does have some things that are helpful, but there's all kinds of restrictions that we can go into. In fact, we can send you a paper on that if you like with all those salient points. We'll send that to you, not a problem. But in terms of outside, again, outside of, it's not the sheriff's intention to charge Ferndale PD or Farmington Hills PD to use the facility. That, I mean, if the board decides that that's what you want to charge for it, I guess that's up to you. But we feel that anybody within the county, this is going to be a county-wide resource for all police agencies, okay? Specifically the training center, because there's multiple, there's EOC and dispatch, what we'll get into in a minute. So in terms of federal agencies or agencies outside of Oakland County, yes, we have had preliminary discussions, and actually the federal government has indicated to us they would be willing. They do very limited amount right now where they come in. They might use our range once a year. Very limited amount in terms of those agencies, but there has been an indication that they would be willing to pay, yes, but we haven't gone beyond that level. And quite frankly, if they don't use it, then, and they don't want to pay, then they don't get to use it.
I have a question, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Cavell.
To what you were just saying, Under Sheriff, I heard you and Captain Perry talk
You're talking to the
about-
microphone.
Oh.
So.
How's that?
Perfect.
So, to what you were saying, Captain Perry, when you were talking about all the different policing agencies that have used the facility, I didn't hear any in the 18th District. You mentioned 3 years ago Southfield had someone show up. No one in Novi or Royal Oak or Farmington Hills or Milford or Lake Orion. So when you say build it and they will come, it is currently free for policing agencies all around the county to utilize what facilities you have, but they don't seem to be utilized.
There are members within your district that do use it that are members of our narcotics enforcement team. It includes Ferdale, Hazel Park, Huntington Woods. Okay, they're part of the team. So,
And Ferndale is part of the OCTAC training consortium.
and then, yeah, every department in Oakland County is part of the OCTAC consortium, which is in the, if you got that paper that the county sent out yesterday,
Yeah.
every department in Oakland County currently does use it under the OCTAC auspice.
How often do they use
Twice a
that?
week, they're training now.
They have been, and we've been very fortunate to be able to have the facility. We did not have to take and go out and solicit or beg, borrow, and steal in order to get a facility to train in. So we've been very fortunate. I was part of OCTAC. I was the former vice president of it when we stood the program up. And we've been very fortunate to have this site, and it's been being utilized pretty consistently over the summer. OCTAC was established after the Mumbai incident that happened in India, where there were armed terrorists that took over the city. Sheriff met with all of the police chiefs and said, if this happens in Oakland County, what are we going to do? We had no strategic plan on how to deal with that. So the sheriff sat down with the chiefs, developed the OCTAC training consortium, which was only six departments initially. And eventually all of the other agencies have come on board. But what we've been able to do over the years, as far as active shooter response and training command officers to deal with active shooter responses, is we've been able to train over 2,000 officers as a force multiplier in order to deal with one of these potential situations. Same tactic, same training, same verbiage, everybody's on the same page. Fortunately, we've never had an actual deployment where we've had to respond to. We had a dry run where there was a false alarm down in Bloomfield a couple of years ago. And it was great to, in the after-action reviews, to see how the things that we've trained them to do, they did. As far as keeping the fire lanes open, making sure that the command post was not set up inappropriately, that the officers responded, that they were able to take and tactically deploy them. All of those things that we had done, it was very beneficial, that training was beneficial. So as we've transitioned, as we're transitioning with manpower, retirements and things like that, it's a necessity to crank this back up to a constant training mode for OCTAC. But all of the areas that you represent have officers, or patrol officers, the guy you see at the donut shop, the guy you see at the gas station, are going there and training.
The current president of OCTAC is the Director of Public Safety, Matt Cohen from Berkeley, is the current president.
So what you're asking us is to do a feasibility study, to then possibly spend between something like $37 million, I've heard, to $88 million, where then how many people will utilize this on what regularity of a basis, right? What I'm getting to is you listed several things, but that doesn't add up in my mind.
We have, our training unit functions year-round.
Right.
Okay, so if,
You're not saying numbers, though.
well, I did.
3,000 plus police officers in Oakland County. Everybody will be able to use it. Everybody.
1,400 sworn with our department. 900 need to qualify every month with the weapons for our department only. So there'll be access, and it'll be utilized.
What I'm asking is, do you have like a training schedule? Because we've talked, and Captain Wondrak and I have talked, and they showed a
Yes.
training schedule. That was great. I don't know if that's in the 150-page thing that Connie was kind enough to make, but if it's not, I'd like to see that, because I don't
I can get you a copy of it. I did not bring it.
appreciate that.
but
Of expected training, not what currently is done.
Sure.
Yeah,
We're already planned out for most of next year.
cool. Of, again, what the potential could be, not next year of what you're going to do, but if there are going to be 3,000 policing units, because, again, in the 18th district, yes, Chief Emmy's talked about being part of OCTEC, and he has the SWAT badge here and all that, but he doesn't talk about needing to show up to something on Brown Road or Elizabeth Lake Road regularly, or having his officers do that. So I'm not fully understanding what will change as a result of building a new facility.
Well, most of these individual departments right now, they have rifle programs. They are renting ranges to be able to certify their officers with patrol rifle. The facility, if you build it, they will come concept. We've already demonstrated that's in progress right now with the limited things that we're able to do at the facility that we have.
And if that's the case, can you just show me more evidence of that with expected training regimen with a new facility?
We put out for you in a paper everything that we will do and all the other police agencies in the county will utilize.
Thank
That's
you.
not a problem.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We
Commissioner
have nothing but support from all the police chiefs on this. They want it.
Right.
Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Markham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think everybody needs to remember we're here to evaluate the feasibility study. A lot of these questions are great, but I think it also is part of the feasibility study that we're looking to run. We'll get answers to a lot of those questions, put those numbers together to determine what, if anything, we're going to spend on building a true facility. Because personally, what I expect out of this feasibility study is options. We build this, it's X. You know, it's 30 million. You build this, it's 50 million. You build this, it's 80 million, with options that does it have a track, like Captain Perry mentioned. They're looking for a track, but it might not fit on that footprint. Do you need to put in something for your motorcycle training? Do you need to put in, how many more lanes do you need in for training all the additional people? To answer your question, Charlie, about the numbers, you know, that's what I expect to see out of this feasibility study. Right? Is all that information so that we can better determine as a Board of Commissioners, with the support of everybody in this room, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense from a county perspective. You know, what can we bring to the outside? Is the FBI going to come in? How often do we predict they're going to come in and put a business plan together that says, okay, this is what makes sense for Oakland County? You know, we all, I think Commissioner Woodward said it, training. We all believe in training. Training is the key to do not only in the sheriff's department, but in everything we do in everyday life. Training is important, because if you don't train, you fall behind. And then we understand in the policing agencies, if you fall behind, something really bad can happen. And you want to prepare for those before they happen. So if you're not prepared, bad things happen, but you need to be prepared for what might happen, and you don't know what's going to happen. So we don't even know what we don't know yet, right? In many cases, yeah, we've seen we have the active shooter program for all the horrific actions that have happened in the past. So that's why that is in place. You know, you mentioned about the terrorist act in Mumbai. Yeah, we now have things in place to protect for those. So we need to be prepared and have a facility that allows us to be prepared, and not only the sheriff's department, but all Oakland County agencies. And then if there's others outside that want to come and use it, I'm sure we'd be more than welcome to help them train them. I think the sheriff's shown that over the history of him being in that position. He's open to help other communities in and out of Oakland County. So remember, we're here to talk about the feasibility study and making that step to put this plan together.
Commissioner Markham, then Commissioner.
Thanks. I'd just like to go back to one of the points Commissioner Woodward made early on, and that is about the CVTs getting all this training for free. We're sitting here looking at a budget this year where we're all being asked to cut the budget by over 4%, if we can. And I think out of the 62 or 63 CVTs that we have, there's got to be varying levels of how much they're using you. I mean, I don't think the Novi people are driving out to Brown Road all that often. I'm sure there are some, but I don't see, I would like to see a more defined cost-benefit analysis between us and the CVTs and what we're providing and what they really need. Because the biggest budget in almost all of the communities is public safety. So we're carrying that for these communities in regards to training. And I would like to understand what that looks like as it relates to the budget for all of this. So, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. I agree with you, and that's what this feasibility study hopefully is going to tell us.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Spiz, for pulling me out of the rabbit hole. And I knew as soon as we were talking training, I was going down that road because I really do want to talk more big picture about what this feasibility study is, because I think the things that you're asking, I'm not convinced is actually part of this proposal. And the reason I ask this is like the vendors that are being selected, we're not, it's being called a feasibility study, but it seems a lot more, it's like a pre-development proposal. I mean, we're talking architectural drawings. Well, you don't draw out drawings until you know, are you building 1 building, 2 buildings, or 3 buildings? There's borings and everything, which I assume it's talking about like, testing out, like, can we build this big giant building here? So we're like talking about location, but I mean, I've heard of the idea of the location is, I'll flag it, I'm not super excited about the location that's been talked about, but I assume that there would be the feasibilities here is like, well, will that location that's being talked about work? It's not what's the optimal location. It's not a conversation, do we look at existing structures and rebuild on it, redevelop an area versus build brand new. For Ed and for the team and everything, help explain to me what exactly, so this $1.5 million, we're going to talk about process in a minute, but this $1.5 million proposed for the selected vendor, I guess in partnership with a subcontractor, what exactly do they do? Because I don't believe that they're going out to say, okay, I get that it's $500 to rent that range. If I rent that range every single day for a year, it's certainly a lot less than $88 million. I mean, obviously, there's other things we're talking in this, but my point is, we're not doing an assessment like, okay, so this is how we currently do it, and if we just continue to bulk up or fix up or do these other types of things, we can continue doing. Like, this is a conversation about building this new building, not, which I interpret is not exactly what Commissioner Spiz says, which I completely agree with, is that we should be looking at all these things and then be making a decision going forward. So, I mean, Ed, can you talk me through what exactly is this proposal bill? The proposal. What exactly would these vendors do? What is the timeline for what their product would be? Show me the phases and what this is.
Sure. So a feasibility study is defined as one that would take us through the schematic design phase. So in architecture and engineering, there's typically 5 design phases, right? You have pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction, and then construction administration, which includes closeout. So what this study would do would again would include the pre-design through schematic design. So in the pre-design phase, we collect all the information, right? We put together a program. And keep in mind that we're talking more than just the Sheriff's Office Training Center here, but we're also talking about emergency management's EOC and the 911 center, and also a storage facility for all the equipment, all the PPE, everything that we're storing in multiple locations spread all over the place. So once, once the programming is done, which dives very deeply into, what we have now, where the deficiencies are, taking a look at what would be ideal for the future, that all of that information then is used then to start developing some drawings, but at a schematic level, right? They are, they're floor plans, but not detailed to the point where they would be ready to go to bid, or they could be used for construction. It also includes some renderings, and yes, it would also evaluate which site might be ideal for these facilities. So in order to do so, it is prudent to do things like soil borings and not make assumptions that just because the space is available that these buildings could actually be placed there. From that, we can develop a more accurate cost estimate. And then, at that time, then that information could be used then to get into what your had mentioned, Commissioner. But the architecture firm isn't going to be tasked with comparing those numbers. I assume that that's something that the Sheriff's Office and Emergency Management Office then would, now that they have the information that they need, they can compare those numbers.
If I could speak for a moment to you mentioned the subcontractor. One of the reasons Captain Meyer and I pushed heavily for the one subcontractor. And part of their proposal, one part is they've done a ton of these specialty EOC 911 and sheriff's training centers around the country, but also part of their proposal is a needs assessment, including public meetings, getting feedback from the public, and finding out, all right, what is the mission of these agencies? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the community needs that could be achieved? And then making recommendations. Even this is a big commitment. You start talking about buildings of that cost, that's a huge financial commitment, on the county. So making sure that you do it right, and that it's proper and that fits the needs. And that company had a strong track record of doing that, and those communities being really happy with what they got, which is why we pushed heavily to have that involvement.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, from a follow, so this pre-planning, is that?
Pre-design?
Pre-design?
So pre-design is the first phase, and then schematic design is the next phase.
So how much of this proposal is the pre-design space and how much is the schematic space?
I don't know how that's broken down, and I'm not even sure that the RFP breaks it down. The RFP requested a feasibility study, which again takes us through schematic design. So, based on some high-level information as to what, the schematic design would include, just looking at maybe some rough numbers as far as square footage, that's the information that's used to lay out the scope through schematic design. Schematic design, is approximately like 20% of the process, right? And if we do move forward and we move this through schematic design, it's not like, if it is approved and we move forward, that information is not lost, right? We pick back up at schematic design and move right into design development and can continue the process.
So is it accurate to say, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is we're not doing the assessment of, this whole proposal is driven towards building buildings, a building or multiple buildings. This isn't about thinking through what are all the options available to us to be able to bulk up training, improve emergency management response, and improving or complementing the dispatch operation. Is it safe to say that this is driving us towards building new buildings?
Yes, no, I mean, I don't think that, that is lost, right? I mean,
And for the record, I like building new buildings. It's like-
Yeah,
it's jobs, it's new,
and I'll
it's-
let the undersheriff and Mr. Hardesty comment on that too, but, that piece is not lost, right? I mean, this is very much a team effort that includes emergency management, the sheriff's office, partners in architecture, facilities management, the specialty consultant. And, you know, it's not just a heads-down approach where we're just focusing on, you know, what's the ideal building and build it, right? I mean,
Well, and that's really at the root of the cause. I mean, the root question here, because it certainly looks like that is the root point, because it's like the stuff that Commissioner Spiz talked about, we're not going to get. We're going to get a schematic for new buildings.
Well, it goes beyond drawings, though, right? I mean, there's going to be, you know, a full report that, you know, is going to be this thick that is going to address, you know, everything that was discussed and discovered during the process, right? And that, you know, this whole process could take a year, and it doesn't take them a year to put together these schematic drawings that we're talking about, right? Majority of that time is spent on the front end stuff, gathering all that information, looking at all the different options, you know, getting the information from the sheriff's office, getting the information from emergency management, you know, getting input from the communities like Mr. Hardesty had mentioned, and then getting information from, you know, the specialty consultant with their experience on, you know, on other options.
I would agree with you. It's not going to evaluate the emergency management program and say, what should the emergency management program be? But it will evaluate Oakland County, what we have here. For example, they look at our hazard mitigation plan, which looks at all the different type of risks that we're at in the county, whether it be weather or terrorist or whatever those might be, and our responsibilities for the county, what the responsibilities of the sheriff's dispatch, how much they cover, how they back up for people, what the size of the sheriff's patrol, and then use that as part of saying, okay, this is the facilities that could support that. So yes, is it pointing towards that facility? But it does look at a needs assessment within there. But it is not evaluating us as an emergency management department and saying, well, you should do this differently. You're correct there.
One last thing, Meg.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, Commissioner Spiz, then Commissioner Woodward.
Go ahead.
No.
I'll yield.
Oh,
Thank
hey.
you, Commissioner. So, but I hear what you're saying, but just like when we work with a vendor to develop an RFP, we say that, okay, you can't bid on this because you developed the RFP. These vendors have a vested interest on building a building in the end. This is what they do. And so of course, I know without even spending a dime, it's going to come back with a proposal to build one, two, or some significant building, which, again, I hear the arguments. There's definitely some that, I'm 100% sold on. Others, I'm not sold on at all. But I just my pushback is that in the end, there's an incentive for these vendors to actually make the case to build this, and I want to help build this and move it to the upper phases. And I'm not thinking nothing nefarious about that. It's like this is what they do. We drew on them because of their experience, and so I guess I want us to be eyes wide open. This is a proposal to move forward to building at least one new building, if not multiple new buildings. So, no.
Commissioner Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to attempt to answer your question, but I think you
thank you.
somewhat answered it yourself. If you go through what we're talking about with this evaluation, right, this feasibility study, we have the Sheriff's Department with training that's moving all over the map and doesn't have a location, right? Yes, we're renting a location. We do not have a location for Oakland County to train our Sheriff's Department or the other Sheriff's Department or other agencies around the county. EOC and the dispatch center, they're archaic. If you guys have toured it, yeah, we got some great equipment in there, high technology, but we're pretty much built out. We can't get any bigger in that facility. Plus, it's archaic. It's built in the 70s, 60s? 50s.
20s and 50s,
So,
yeah.
ultimately, yes, it's going to get somewhere. It's going to be, and you said a new facility. Possibly, that's probably, in my belief, it's probably the highest potential, but that doesn't mean we can't retrofit X facility, retrofit a Y facility, something else fits the plan, and that's where I get back to what I said earlier, option A, B, or C, or 1, 2, 3, and here's a cost associated with them. Maybe we take the current building, we just revamp it and add on to it. I don't think it's feasible based on the age of it, but that doesn't mean it's not a possibility.
Well, and when they talked about feasibility, and I'm also the one that pushed to add at least the discussion of a warehouse. I'm not any history of any site construction. I couldn't tell you if a warehouse for what we're seeing happening is 500,000 or 5 million. So I did push to at least have that be a discussion point because this is a feasibility study. Is that something we would consider worth paying for or not compared to now what we're renting? So that was an add-on that I
Right,
pushed.
and there's multiple different aspects going into this feasibility study, right? And they're all in different locations around the county today. This group feels that that'd be better that they're in one group. But as part of the feasibility study, it may pan out, and as we as a board look at it and look at the numbers and evaluation, it may be more financially feasible and realistic to have 3 separate buildings around the county somewhere else.
Well,
We don't know.
Reason
That's what the feasibility study is for, is to help us figure out some of those things. Plus, when they put the RFP together, you're talking 20,000, 100,000 foot discussions. When we get into the feasibility study and the stuff that Ed was mentioning up front, you're gonna get into deeper the weeds of what exactly we need. We have 5 lanes for training right now, right, firearms training. We might need 50. I mean, sure, you have a good idea, but we need to sit down with a group of people, ask other agencies, what do we think we need to develop that, and how many people, and I'm sure there's good studies out there across the country already, say, okay, you got 3,000 people are gonna use it, you need X amount of lanes. And that'll all have to be put into a piece of paper and requirements for the architects. Okay, this is what the footprint's gonna start looking like. And you rough it out before you really start to get into the details and spend any real money on a new building. Because if you rough it out, you say, okay, we don't have any buildings that exist today that can even do that. You have to build a new building.
Well, and to your point, Commissioner, there with weather-resistant buildings, we don't have any. The 911 Center and Emergency Operations Center are expected to operate in the middle of the mess. That's when you have to be there. During the pandemic, our staff weren't operating from home. They were spending more time in the office. They were meeting in hallways. The tornado, they're operating. That tornado's a few miles to the east, and unfortunately, that building's not there. So that is, our responsibility for both ours, and the reason we've pushed heavily to keep them together is because we communicate a lot during emergencies and disasters. And both of those two need to operate in the worst of conditions.
So Commissioner Markham and Commissioner Cavell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to change the subject just a little bit about where are we going to put these buildings if we decide we're going to build new buildings. We have a study underway right now looking at the environmental aspects of the entire campus, the buildings that exist, what kind of energy they're using, how we move about the campus and all of that. I want that to be part of this discussion for sure. Where should this building really be? We have buildings, I know, on this campus that are 100 years old, roughly, that we're storing paper in. Maybe the right thing to do is to knock that down and build something new, right where it was. You got a mall right across the street. You're sitting here talking about a track. I'm thinking, have we talked to the people who own that property over there about what we might want to do with the sheriffs, over there? The environmental aspects of whatever it is we're going to do, in my opinion, needs to meet our stated goals to move forward toward net zero carbon emissions. And that means I want to see standards for these buildings. The wording in here was kind of, well, we'll look at the environmental aspects and we're not maybe going to go for LEED. I think as a minimum, we have to say that these buildings will meet LEED standard, LEED Gold, as what we want to do. I don't want whatever we build as a new building to be anything but state-of-the-art going forward. And I want the costs of that to be properly evaluated, but also look at the energy savings we're going to see down the road. And I want all of this tied together so that I'll tell you, I don't like the idea of tearing up 88 acres of green space that we own right at the entrance to the county to do this. I just think with as much property as we have, as many old buildings as we have, that discussion really needs to be had about where are we going with this. And I don't want these buildings to be in conflict with that. That being said, I do understand your logic, and I am in general support of all of this going forward. I think it's important to train. I think it's important to store our facilities in good storage places. I mean, just look at the car dealership down here where you're storing all your vehicles. The costs alone in just rent and energy going up into the air, you know, yes, we need to be doing better going forward. So I'm generally in support of this, but I really want the environmental aspects of what we're doing to meet our stated county goals. We're leading in moving forward on climate change, and I want this to address that directly. So that's my point.
Commissioner Kowal. Well, unless you want to respond, I apologize.
I just,
Okay.
if you want me to address that, I can, but that's totally.
Yeah, you're more
Sure.
than welcome to, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so Commissioner, as you had mentioned, the county has contracted with a vendor that is helping us with a campus-wide sustainability plan, right? And that evaluation, you know, will help us, you know, determine where we're at, what opportunities we have, and, you know, hopefully clearly, I shouldn't say hopefully, the plan is, that plan will set a firm goal for what the county is going to do. Are we going to be a LEED Gold campus? Are we going to be net zero carbon emissions, so on and so forth? So we are actively doing that. As you know, we're close to bringing on the county's first environmental sustainability officer, who will be involved in that effort as well. And you also mentioned, you know, a study to take a look at our existing facilities and what opportunities there may be. You know, we've also contracted with another vendor that is helping us with that study, where they're evaluating the departments and the footprint needs, especially with the new remote work, right? So, you know, I think the results of those will help us get to, you know, the bottom of the things that you had brought up. The 88 acres, I think, is initially being looked at simply because of the size of these facilities, right? Again, the feasibility study is going to help us determine what they, you know, what they need to be, but you know, looking back at the animal shelter that we built a few years ago, you know, we looked at building it down at the 88 acres. It was determined at that time that we needed to try to shoehorn it in somewhere here on campus. And we were able to do that, but, you know, the site wasn't ideal, and that is like a 43,000 square foot building, right? You know, these facilities that we're talking about here are 75,000 square foot, 80,000 square foot, and then if we do a storage facility, we're talking 130,000 square feet, right? So when you put that together with the parking needs, and if we look at a track, and again, if we're looking at keeping it centrally located in Oakland County, which is where we sit, I'm not saying that, you know, on campus won't be looked at. We're going to need the results of the CIP study as far as the environmental aspect of it. We're going to need the results of that assessment as well. But again, yes, I personally agree that if, like, the most responsible thing to do environmentally is to remodel an existing building, which I don't think we have that luxury, because as Mr. Hardesty said, it does not meet the needs of what's required for these facilities as far as being able to withstand a tornado of a certain level. But also keeping in mind, though, too, that, you know, within the last couple of years, there was another feasibility study that was done, and that is also being taken into consideration as well, that, you know, potentially there may be another building or two that is built for another department, and if so, then, you know, the infrastructure that we have to put in at the 88 acres has even more value.
Okay, well, we haven't done anything yet, so I just wanted to put a stake in the ground
Yep.
that says, whatever we do, we have to set a standard
Yep.
going forward, you know? And if we're not going to meet certain environmental aspects, it needs to be clearly stated as to why.
Yep, understood. And I agree. I agree 100%. I hear you loud and clear. You know, the RFP, when written, as written, like you said, is fairly loose on sustainability efforts, right? But that RFP was written a while ago. Let's just say that, right? And it has already been discussed amongst the team and amongst purchasing and administration that if we are going to move forward with these firms, that once the sustainability study has helped us define, you know, what our goals are going to be, that we are going to sit down with them and make sure that it's clearly defined what those goals are, and we will design and build to those goals.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cavall.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question and maybe a few questions, or no more questions, depending on what you say, Ed.
No more questions.
Good call.
Good answer.
All right, cool.
Sorry.
So the pre-design and schematic phase, I'm trying to sound smarter than I am. Will Commissioner Spiz's kind of pros about we're going to get 3 or 4 ideas back about what to do and how to do it, is that real, or is that him kind of talking out of school? Because, yikes, because what I'm hearing Chair Woodward say is, and what I understand you right, you're saying we're going to come up with round numbers of we need 800,000 square feet of space to do any number of things. And they could go, those 800,000 square feet could end up here, here, and here, or in this way, or this way. Is that right? Or are you going to give us things back that say we put a track here, we put a track there, or we don't put a track in, for example?
So, first off, I think Commissioner Spiz's explanation was pretty spot on. I think he's got a good understanding of this. But I can't, you know, I can't say for sure, right? We've done feasibility studies in the past where, you know, there have been 2 or 3 options to choose from, and here are the pros and the cons of each, right? We've also done feasibility studies in the past where, because of the requirements, because of the space needs, so on and so forth, that if we're going to put it here on campus, there's only one place to put it. You can't fit it anywhere else, either because of infrastructure, again, space needs, adjacency, you know, so on and so forth. So. I wish I could
Yeah.
tell you how many options we're going to bring you right now, but I can't. It could be 1. It could be 3. I'm anticipating that it's not going to be a lot, simply because, again, of the size
Yeah.
that we're talking about and the special requirements for these types of facilities and how they need to be constructed.
So then there's a couple more questions.
And
Sorry to
as
bug you
well,
out.
as well as security too. We want to keep that in mind, that we want to be able to locate these facilities where we can secure them and not have you know, the public have easy access to the buildings, right?
Mhm. So then there are a couple more questions then. So part 1 is, when we get that schematic back, will it have comparisons of the prep information we got, right? Hard box buildings or hardened building? hardened buildings. Does Westchester County have a hardened building? Does Montgomery County have a flood-proof building? Does Kings County have a tornado-proof? You know, are we doing something that no one else is doing because we're better? Or are we doing something no one else is doing because they all deemed in their own communities that it wasn't worth $88 million? So will that sort of information come back of like anecdotal or comparable evidence of other communities? Or is it just going to be the, you know, numbers?
So
like you were saying?
it will include that, you know, again, you know, Partners in Architecture is the local firm, and it's very typical on specialized facilities like this that they partner with a specialty firm. And that's what's being proposed here, is that this firm will bring on a subcontractor out of Florida who this is all they do. This is all they do. They've done dozens, if not more of them. And they're, so they bring that information. And really, there are rules and regulations that say, you know, we're not just going to build this to withstand an X tornado because we think it should, or that we want to be better than everybody else. There are requirements that say, you know, it must be this, it must be that.
That's not what I'm asking, though.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
for example, because we looked at some of those examples of others, but it may not be the same because a building built in Southern California is being designed to withstand, you know, earthquake and fault line, and those aren't hazards here. So we don't want to spend the money to address a hazard that isn't a hazard here. So
Right.
they take those hazards that FEMA says, this is what you need to worry about in your region, and then yes, you look at other examples in this region that match those things.
And that will be part of the feasibility report, is that the Cleveland County whatever building is hardened based on comparable things. That will be part of the feasibility study. It won't just be FEMA says we need to make it tornado-proof because FEMA says. It's FEMA says, and Ingham County is also doing something like this, or Cook County is also, right? We're going to see examples?
And, yes, and,
Okay.
and part of this is, part of this plan is for the team to actually go and visit some of those facilities, right? To see those facilities and to sit down and talk to those that own and operate those facilities to get their feedback on their process and how they operate today and what works well and what they might have done differently.
Okay. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, and it's more of a statement, is the way you've been talking, because I understand it's your job as an employee working in facilities, and the way that you all have been talking because you're in the sheriff's department, the way you've been talking about because you run emergency operations, it sounds as though, and this kind of piggybacks off what Chair Woodward, I think, was kind of intimating, is that it sounds to me as though we do need a track. It sounds to me as though we might need 50 lanes for gun ranges. Those are all value statements. The 18th district, if I go to the 18th district and talk to our residents, they're going to say, well, doesn't the state police have a track? Can't y'all do that? Why do we have to spend my hard-earned tax dollars on a track? And those sorts of questions seem not answerable by a transparent process if we're going to be doing sort of feasibility study. And now this is my first feasibility study, so maybe this is how it always works. But it feels as though there's less input. Yeah. Like once we start this, it will be, here are your three options. We all kind of went into the smoky room and figured out what we think is best for our departments and our units of government using other people's money. And that doesn't feel very good. And I don't know if that's how it always goes, but that
Yeah,
doesn't feel good.
Can I mention, though, too, right, that, so I think I understand your question, but I also want to mention, too, that Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell have also been tasked with, you know, being part of the, I'll refer to it as the Oversight Committee,
Okay.
that will continue to be part of this process.
There was an oversight committee for the RFP. For the first part, to where we've gotten,
Right.
and that'll continue.
Yes, that's my understanding. I've always been under the impression that moving forward, that
It's your amendment.
it's my job to keep Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell up to speed and provide all the information that we're gathering.
Understood.
And the only thing I would follow up with, Commissioner, is that part of the one vendor's proposal includes public meetings to seek feedback from the public on these concepts.
Okay.
Well, we got Commissioner Spiz, Commissioner Wiper, Commissioner Woodward, then Commissioner Charles.
All right, I'll keep it short. I just wanted to touch on what Commissioner Markham said. I expect these facilities to be state-of-the-art and top-of-the-line environmental. And the only thing from an option standpoint for the LED rating is that'll be, to me, will be called out as a separate line item, because what is it gonna cost us to do so? And we, as a board of commissioners, need to evaluate that, because we ultimately spend the money, right? We ask the experts for what they think, they come to us and tell us what they think, and then we say, okay, here's how much money we have to do to get you as much of where you want to get to. So with that, I'll yield the floor to whoever's next.
Commissioner Wiper.
I was going to say something. It's going to be regional. You're the experts. You're going to rely on the experts, right? You know that we've got a board going that we want stuff LEED certified and we want environmental. All that. These folks all know that. These experts are coming in. They're going to educate you. You guys know you're experts too. So that's all going to be taken into consideration, right?
Yes, sir. And I had a conversation with a commissioner last night about this, and I told her, we agree 100% with what she's saying.
Exactly.
I mean, you're not going to build something or suggest something that's outdated right off the bat. We don't want to.
We're not going to propose a coal factory on the
Right.
county.
So,
Oh, he told me. Oh, never mind.
I told you we support what you're saying.
Yeah, you did.
We'll go Commissioner Charles because she hasn't gone yet, then Commissioner Woodward.
Why, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, everyone, and Mr. Hardesty, I found your comments to be greatly helpful for me as I ponder this. You know, I pretty much, oh, I hear my alarm going off. I pretty much find the need for it established, and I'm happy that there was a needs assessment done where you got buy-in from the community, as I understand it, or is that coming down the pike? But my concern, Mr. Chair, is this firm, Partners in Architecture, in particular. You know, it doesn't take a lot to do our due diligence as far as who works at these companies. And I actually don't see one single person of color on LinkedIn at all as far as the company's concerned. And it's just redundant. I've been here about 8 months, and so my comments are going to close with that. But then when we go to other business, I'll be speaking to that again. Thank you.
Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Commissioner Charles. It actually starts leading to my conversation, and I want to thank Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell for being involved in this process. But I mean, I've talked to some of you individually. I am really displeased on how this RFP process happened. The reason why is that we had an authorizing resolution that allowed for the development of this RFP, that prescribed in it that the Board of Commissioners will be part of that process to design the RFP and to review the RFP process. And for whatever reason, I'm going to say oversight or whatever, that never happened. Why that's a problem, I think this gets to Commissioner Charles' point, that there are policy priorities that have been embraced in this county: diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental, diverse groups, people in the room discussing things. The conversation sometimes is different. Furthermore, so I guess my first question is, why did that happen? Why wasn't the board, as the resolution prescribed, to authorize this RFP to go out to bid and the review process, why wasn't the board involved?
So I'll respond first, and I'm sure it's not going to be an acceptable answer, but I was not involved in that RFP or in the MR. This was something that was brought to me after, right? Wasn't that brought by the board and by the sheriff's office?
No, well, the undersheriff certainly was involved in that MR.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in the RFP process. Our staff was.
Well, not the RFP, but I was referring to the initial
The resolution
resolution.
had our involvement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it just didn't happen. All right. And am I right that there were no women or people of color part of the RFP development and RFP, I mean, on the committee that developed the RFP and / reviewed and selected firms?
Right, so as far as the RFP, we used one of our annual architect vendors to help us draft that. And he's a one-man show. So JFR Architects. And then to answer your other question, the answer is no. Joan Daniels from purchasing was involved in the process, but I don't believe she's not a voting member that scores the RFPs.
I'm asking for scores.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I appreciate it.
She oversees the whole process and makes sure it's kosher.
So in that process, was there any consideration for Oakland County firms? I mean, again, supporting our local economy, particularly our brick and mortar businesses, is something that I have been deeply involved in, which is a reminder. Can we get that resolution introduced into by Oakland first Thursday? It's coming to mind, because I don't know if it's, but was any extra consideration given to work with Oakland County firms that pay county taxes here that could be part of this process?
So I know that the resolution that was adopted that put together what the scoring should be is what was followed. So if that was in there, the answer is yes. If it wasn't, the answer was no, because we can't give preference to someone within Oakland County if that's not one of the scoring criteria.
But there were Oakland County firms that bid on this project?
Yes, I believe there was 11 total.
11 total. Was there any consideration given to like women-owned, traditionally disadvantaged, or veteran-owned firms?
I don't believe so, and the reason is the same thing, right? We have, we follow what's in the resolution that was adopted by the board, and whatever the scoring metrics are in there is what we have to abide by when scoring and selecting these firms. And again, that's part of the job of having Joan Daniels or a representative from purchasing there, and part of the process is to make sure that all of that is followed.
But I also believe in that process that we reserve the right to make consideration and changes as it sees our priorities or our needs being met. That's explicitly, and that was the
I would say-
justification for the subcontractor.
Yes, yeah.
Got it. What were any of these? Are any of these firms have experience or experience working with prevailing wage jobs, David Bacon jobs? Was that even a question asked of them? Why it's relevant in terms of the pricing of these things going forward?
So I don't know if that was asked of them, and maybe it wasn't, because we're simply talking about right now an architecture firm, right, that is tasked with a feasibility study and not a contractor that deals with construction that would have labor.
But how do we price a building if we don't know the labor cost to build the building?
So,
or are we just using general estimates per square footage based on these, that we're not even taking into consideration of labor?
right, so yes, it will be based on square footage, based on what, when the schematic design is complete, looking at the schematic design plans, then from that, the architect, and you'll see in the budget, we're also proposing a $100,000 allowance to eventually partner up with a construction management firm that will help us put dollar amounts on the facilities. Now, that can be priced considering prevailing wage, right? Or I think when they're using the square foot numbers, they're using a general number, right? If we specify that it must be all prevailing wage, then that's something that we're going to want to tell them, and they're going to want to know up front, because it may impact what the estimates are.
Thank you. To Commissioner Marco's point of view, that there, in terms of designing this building for maximum energy efficiency, that wasn't part of the conversation or the evaluation of a firm who has experience, whether an architect or engineering operation, that was, my guess is that was a part of it. I mean, based on the conversation, I mean, going forward, we want more energy, we want new, we want the best energy efficiency. My point of bringing up all these points, had commissioners been part of that process, I guarantee you these questions would have come up. And me personally, I have a hard time supporting this proposal as is, and actually almost starting to consider rebidding the entire thing to make certain that these things can be considered. It is, unanimous support for that resolution, explicitly told to me that, the whole point of this is to have a commission, the Board of Commission, Executive Office, the Sheriff, Homeland Security, working together to kind of figure out how to do this. And that was, again, I trust you at your word. I mean, that didn't happen for whatever. I mean, it should have happened. And we would have a better product as a result of that. As it relates to the firms that got selected, my next question, and Mr. Hardesty, you started talking about this, with why this Florida firm. It does not compute in my head. 11 firms participated. We have the most educated workforce in Michigan. We have some of the best firms in the entire country. I cannot wrap my head around that we do not have the expertise in Oakland County, or at minimum in Metro Detroit, to be able to do this, that we have to rely on hiring a Florida firm. So I'm not cool about it. And I would prefer that we look at who else has these expertise, because the reality is, like, if the principal firm doesn't have the expertise to do this, then maybe we've hired the wrong principal firm, and we should be looking at the one that actually does have the expertise, whatever the criteria is. So, I guess I'd like you to respond to that. And I didn't realize you were the one advocating for that particular vendor, but I want to, again, respect your thought in that, but also, hear where I'm coming from, that I am laser focused in trying to keep as much of our public dollars in the local economy as much as possible. And I'm hard pressed to understand that this Florida firm is the only one in this area that can actually provide the service.
Two things to that. One, the green space and lead and all that was a question that was asked of every vendor, and was a discussion point all the way through there, because knowing that they're moving that direction. As far as the local architects, especially the hardened facilities are so special. Even the firms that have a footprint locally, none of their people were from here. The engineers that they're proposing that will do this were from either Virginia, Florida, or California. So there are none of them that bid on this project that the engineers that would handle that part of it are based in Michigan. They're all based somewhere else and would be coming here just for that. And this firm out of Florida is the one who's done combined 911 and EOC centers. Really, in our opinion, there were only two that were even worth discussing that have experience doing that, and that was kind of a going back and forth. And then this firm, far and above the other ones, just had vast experience. Besides the fact that this company really talked about what could they do to help. They brought up the idea of grant funding and helping us write a BRIC grant, which is what opens here this month, to help get funding to help make this a hardened facility, because FEMA wants us to have that. They talk about partnering with the state police, because the state police is the only other one that has a hardened facility, getting their support for that grant because it could become a backup for them, and vice versa, because there are no other hardened facilities. So getting their support to help us to write the grant and to help do it. And that was really the things that stood out with this firm, is it's not just about saying, okay, you want a building that's this size to do this, we can do it. This building, this company actually has ideas and things like that to help make it better and to maybe even make it more affordable. Thinking about things like, if you're going to go through the cost of doing this, do you even consider putting some sort of data center there? Because now you have a hardened facility, and now that's another area of protection that you've done for the county. So that's why they stood out over and above. But there was not a single engineer proposed for that facility that was from Michigan, from any of the firms.
You said it was two firms.
There was another one, AECom, they have a footprint in Oakland County, but their engineers for that were out of Virginia. They would not be from here. They would fly in to discuss this just like the other firms.
I'm going to jump in for a second.
If I can-
With, no, you're good. Just so I don't come back with this question while we're talking about it.
Are from
So
Oakland County.
you talk about the engineers come from somewhere else, and this goes to an argument that I've had a lot of times, is the money stays here, though, in the county, right? They're getting their engineer from Virginia or where have you, but the company's here, you know, gaining revenue, could potentially build their own footprint. The Florida company's taking the money back to Florida, and that's where the money goes, right? So our money's leaving out of the state and the county. And the second one is I've heard about this company that, and not knocking it because I totally for the experience and, you know, the quality, but the one thing that was pushed around is like, we picked this company because they talked about having meetings with the community. Why wasn't that something that we didn't put in there? Because that shouldn't be in it like a thing like, well, we're going to go with them because they're going to have meetings. We should automatically say, you got to have meetings with the community about this. That's part of the RFP, right? Part of the process. Or why aren't we having the meetings, right, with the company there? So those are the two things that I had.
And none of those points are invalid. I would just go back, especially to the building part. They're highly, highly specialized with the technology and the integration of these, and it's only a handful of companies, not just worldwide, really, that would be qualified to. It's a huge investment. I mean, the likelihood, if you did all three of these buildings, is that building would be the most expensive because of the hard. It's a huge financial commitment, and wanting to make sure that commitment is done properly. That's my biggest concern. You're going to spend all that money, that it's invested properly. Unfortunately, I've been through a new building build with a new public safety building and know some of the headaches that went with it and things that we wish we could have done differently, and it doesn't mean it's not working, but just trying to make sure you do it right the first time, because it is a big commitment.
And if I can add to that too, so, you know, really these specialty companies, you know, there are really only a handful of them, you know, like Mr. Hardesty was saying, either in the country or across the world. You know, they don't bid on these projects directly. They prefer to partner up with local firms. So, as Mr. Hardesty mentioned, none of them bid directly on this job. What happens is these specialty firms will know that the job is being bid, and they will reach out to local firms. More typically, what happens is the local firms, or whoever wants to bid it, they reach out to these specialty firms and say, hey, as a part of our proposal, we want to partner with you and bring your expertise on board. It was the same process with the Animal Care Center. I think there was 3 to 5 experts in those type of facilities that were identified. And, you know, we contracted with a local architecture firm, and they partnered up with a firm out of Colorado that specializes in those types of facilities. Yet that firm from Colorado never bid on the project.
Or if you want to continue, I cut you off. I apologize.
I believe that this RFP review process flawed largely because some of the policy priorities are part of this board, and certainly weigh heavy on me in deciding any desire to appropriate the monies to actually build this, not being caught in the front end. And when we talk about structural issues that allow the perpetuation of things that have been happening, it's because that we are not taking the time to actually break through those. More importantly, making certain that we have people in the room that can help make sure that those issues are brought to light. So I've got some, kind of my opportunity, I guess, on capital improvements. Weighing this, and I've told this, and I've explained this, and I've talked to anyone who wanted to talk to me about it. I struggle. First of all, this is about 50% more expensive than what we kind of set aside originally to do this. The second, there's the opportunity cost that we have significant infrastructure needs in this county. We have a jail that's roof is leaking. We have a records room that flooded. I can only imagine that there's more that, thank God, terrible things haven't happened, that need sizable investment. So like my comfort level to allocate $1.5 million for a building we have no money to pay for, versus addressing our house, our home, I mean, our current infrastructures, to look at this in a vacuum without recognizing the infrastructure needs around is problematic for me. And so from an opportunity cost, the fact that it's, again, more expensive than what we, thought it would be able to do. I've talked to some of my colleagues, looking, can we break it up? Can we look at phase one and just do phase one? And then, does that bring the cost down? To keep it more within kind of the set aside funds available for this project versus drawing on other things that frankly, in my opinion, is better suited to address, to minimize overcrowding in the jails and preservation of evidence and these other things. Because we need a solution to those, and I realize an item was pulled off the agenda, and I think looking for another funding source or figuring out another way to pay for these things, we need to, that's got to get taken care of. Again, I'm supportive of training. Everyone knows that I want a bigger dispatch center to, frankly, force the merger of more dispatch to save costs that I think we are necessarily putting out there, as well as a state-of-the-art emergency operations center. But there are other things that I believe also have a higher priority. So I struggle with the appropriation of dollars for something that we don't have a funding source to be able to do this. Now, I'm very happy to hear that my colleague, the Republican caucus, is advocating for a tax proposal countywide, and that might be one way, but it's not. We don't think that's all pie in the sky. We don't have the money to be able to do this.
Can I just say something real quick? Part of me feels like I need to defend myself here. You'd mentioned that this is 50% more than what was originally thought, and again, I just want it to be known that I have no idea where that number came from. I was not involved. My department had no idea that the resolution was even written and brought to the board. Like, I was contacted after the fact and asked to be part of the process and helping with the RFP and getting.
Who contacted you after the fact?
I don't recall.
Because they would have had the resolution. And I'm not trying to.
Yeah, no,
it is really insulting to this board, in my opinion, and I will defend this board, that they were locked out. Locked out is probably more of an exaggerated term, but left out of this process. And frankly, my lack of support for this resolution is probably most rooted into that. And I have been struggling trying to find a way to get to yes and to kind of make up that ground. But it's grossly unacceptable. And I don't, short of requiring every RFP process to have a board representation on it or something like that, to guarantee that the ones that we want to be clear stakeholders in, and I know this is actually a shared sentiment, so I'm gonna voice it, it shouldn't have happened. And I do appreciate, Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell put in the time to kind of look at something after the decision's been made, to kind of look at that. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough for me.
Yeah, and I understand it was late, right? I'm not going to deny that. The decision was not made. It was narrowed down, but there was no contract awarded. There was no communication with the firm that they would be selected. So their involvement did happen shortly before that.
All right, okay, I'm sorry.
Shortly before the
resolution drafted? I guess that happened before the resolution was drafted,
Yeah.
but the firm that was selected and the plan going forward was determined. Yes.
It would have to be, because I didn't get it as the chair of this committee until everything was already
So
complete.
before the resolution was drafted, that noted who the firm,
Who the RFP,
who the proposed firm would
Yeah.
be and what the amount would be,
was,
that information, all the bid results, the RFP responses were shared with the commissioners.
correct.
Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell.
That is correct. It was part, I mean, we asked to see all of it, which they shared with us, right?
But the decision was made.
The final decision wasn't made, but they gave us what the recommendation was based on. the
Who
data
had, who had scored the
Yes,
highest?
they gave us all that information.
I'm confused. I mean, I know ultimately the final decision will rest with this board of like
Correct.
what's picked. I mean, so I know that point, but it was very
We
clear.
saw all the information that came in, right?
I get it.
They-
but I
they
mean,
gave us information
We
on
were
how
not
they-
part of that conversation.
Right.
We weren't part of the
That's
scoring,
correct.
and I would argue that the scoring would arguably be different if we had different, I mean, we had participation in it.
And I'm not going to argue that, I would just add, though, too, that, again, we followed the, again, like, I get it, I understand.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, my issue is that the board, our
Yep.
commission participation in the design of that RFP and the selection committee.
Yep.
And I mean, you run a good shop, so obviously this is not directed at you.
Yeah, and I understand, and it would be helpful to us, right? I mean, if those are the things that you want to see, right? One way is what you're saying, and that is to have someone from the board involved in all of our RFPs from day one. It was my understanding that a way to address that was to have the resolution that the board approved with all of the items that the board felt were important and have scoring weights applied to those so that we could use that as our template when we go out for these RFPs and award contracts.
So,
I'm good.
Commissioner Charles and then Commissioner Spitz.
Yes, thank you. Being one of two new commissioners here, I do feel compelled to ask, through the chair, to the board
Well,
chair.
first I'll say you got 8 months under your belt. You're not new. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You'd be surprised. However, you mentioned about the potential of re-RFPing this thing, and I just wanted you to explain what the pros and cons of something such as that, because currently, Mr. Cavell and myself are hearing that a lot of this was done pre-us, and I certainly don't want to be grouped up into less than stellar actions by the board. So I'd love to hear about that, because it seems reasonable what the expectations were. And again, I don't think we as a board, as a county, have a policy that we can even stand by when it comes to procurement and vendors per corporation council about what you can't even ask. Some things are off the table. So, I'm in this gray area of, can we even ask those things if it were to come to us? And again, I want this to happen because I'm a big fan of training, as we've already stated. I just want to make sure the needs assessment was done in the right order.
If I may.
Well,
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Spitz was
Yeah.
next. I don't know if you. If
No, go ahead.
To answer the question. So, I would like, I'm going to go off the cuff, and so, I'd like to have our staff check to verify this, but, I looked at there are 3 options. There's a resolution before us, I went through it, that, that the board could authorize release of these funds, and then the vendors are picked and everything. We talked about, my personal issues with some of that process. I don't think that there's anything that precludes us from bidding this out. Now, doing so would, there's a hiccup. It will take time and all those types of stuff, but I firmly believe that's within the authorization. This board authorized this RFP to go out. And there's no reason why we can't authorize another to go out. And I guess the third option is there something that can be done? Is there language that can be added to this resolution that tries to establish kind of like a bridge between those 2 options? And the short answer might be no, that there might be some things that we can add, things that come to mind, and some of the questions that I raised. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to build any new building. I love building new buildings. I'm not building any new buildings that's not LEED Gold certified or better, ever. Significant renovations, you can go to silver if you got an old building. But new building, nothing less than LEED. It will never get my vote. I'm using that as an example. I think an absolute requirement that the vendor selected in kind of these preliminary stages, that we put a requirement to go out to bid for construction and all those types of things. And frankly, because the way, I mean, I've been around enough. I mean, the nature of this business is that these firms want to help build this building, and I don't fault them for it. But be clear that we're going to go out to bid with a process that with board participation on any selection of on the engineering and the final construction, those final phases of the development project. A requirement that that any cost estimation, is that the right word? Estimating. Is done considering compliance with a Davis-Bacon Act project or paying prevailing wage, especially since, I hope, frankly, if we don't come up with some federal funding, I don't even understand how we're ever going to get the money to be able to build this, because we don't have the money. But those are like requirements. And so I think that's those considerations might, help address some of the things. Oh, and I think we put some intentionality around any subcontracting or additional subcontracting or whatever, or can we go back to the drawing board to look to, are there Oakland County firms? Are there firms with women-owned, traditionally disadvantaged veteran, which is a criteria that the federal government uses. So these are things we can ask, and these are things that we can award points to, if you will, in a point structure. Also might be part of a more macro conversation, but it certainly needs to be a conversation when we start getting into the 88 million side of leisure. So, I would like staff to, check to see if I missed anything, but I think those are really kind of the three choices before us.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to touch on a couple of the comments here. Yes, we as a board could always go back out and push for another RFP. To me, there's risk with that, because we already have one. We've had 11 vendors that already quoted that. They know what the numbers they put in, all right? And I wouldn't be surprised if they know approximately where their competitors are. So then you start to drive changes in their numbers and sharpening those pencils and things that, to me, become unethical to a degree, right? From a bidding process standpoint, unless we're gonna have major changes in our scope, in our requirements, which from what I heard around the table, I don't think there's major changes in the scope. There's a couple things I think were discussed but may not be in the requirements document, like LEED certified. According to Mr. Hardesty, that was discussed. Environmental sustainability topics were there. So to me, there's a high risk of going out and doing that again, outside of timing. Normally, for me, timing is important, but it's not critical. Doing the right thing is critical, right? And I think the information that we have in the current RFP is not going to change much if we put our 2 cents into it, right? The experts are here. We're going to add a little bit here, a little bit there. And then touch on Commissioner Woodward's point. I fully expect us to go out for bid and quote before we do any type of construction. What we're getting here is a feasibility proposal with options in it that allows us as a board and with the experts to make a decision if and when we want to go out for build, either revamping a facility, building a brand new facility, finding how we're going to get funding, because that's what the board is going to have to come up with support from you guys, because that is a big issue. On top of that, we probably need to have bigger discussions, which I know we have talked about, from a capital investment program as an entire county, because I'm concerned about some of those topics you brought up too. This is a feasibility study only to get us prepared to make those decisions. Without this information, we don't have good data to make those decisions. So to me, this is a step getting us towards the end game where we want to get to. Now, do we build this building in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? We have to have a good capital improvement plan to be able to do that. And we need this information to say, okay, we as a county are gonna look at building X out of the 3, 4, 2 proposals we get out of this feasibility study. That's how I look at it. So to me, it's a risk to go back and do another feasibility study based on the information that's already out there in the marketplace.
Risk due to the RFP.
Yes, that's from my perspective.
Commissioner Whiteford.
Your option 3 I'm sorry.
No, you're next.
Your option 3, these firms know, it's going to be all new. They're proposing new. It's going to have good environment. It's going to have good energy. They know. They wouldn't come back with something, here's our proposal, you're going to build an antiquated building, right? You could settle your option 3 and maybe let them have the message, this is what it better be coming back with. That's just giving them direction.
Yeah.
And if I may too, Commissioner Woodward, you mentioned the firm and their lead experience. I'm not sure I know of any firms in the area nowadays that don't have almost top to bottom lead expertise, right? Almost.
I do.
Okay. Well, in my experience,
No, I mean, they'll say they do.
Okay.
And then there's like certified U.S. Green Building Council architects that really do.
Yeah.
I've heard it, even when we built that animal shelter building, I fought this fight then. I was like, oh, we're doing all those things, we just don't call it lead. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're doing. So, I mean, I'm sure there is expertise. Again, this is like, I think it should be a scoring consideration. I mean, ones with more expertise is better than ones with less, in my opinion. But this is where we are now, so.
Yeah, and Commissioner Woodward, I hope you don't sense that I'm, rebuttal.
I feel bad that I feel like you felt that I was.
Yeah, no, yeah,
I didn't
but
mean to.
again, I'll just keep leaning on that. We've been giving those guidelines, right? And if lead accreditation or expertise is something that's an important criteria, then by all means, but we're trying to follow the rules as they've been written, right? And then, to echo Commissioner Spiz's points about, the other criteria that Commissioner Woodward mentioned, I agree that those things maybe lend to the next step when we start looking at bringing on construction managers, right? Because I think the funding will help us determine what additional criteria we might be able to add to those selections. Because to Commissioner Charles' point, I'm not sure that, I'm not the purchasing department, but I'm not sure that we can actually, use some of those other criterias legally, right? And again, I haven't left out some of the things that you had brought up and mentioned because they weren't important to me, right? And again, it's super helpful to have purchasing as part of the process because they are making sure that everything that we're doing is by the book and as it's been spelled out for us, right? And the team that was brought together for reviewing the RFPs are the technical expert, right, folks from the sheriff's office and from emergency management and one person from facilities management.
Commissioner Cavell, and we have a guest speaker.
I have a couple of questions and then another quick thing to say. Did I hear you right, Mr. Hardesty, saying there are no hardened facilities? You were answering someone's question. You said there's no hardened facilities around.
State, for example, emergency operations centers, state-run hardened facilities to that level. The only one that I'm aware of is the State Emergency Operations Center, which was just built a few years ago.
Okay.
It's not to say there might be a private industry
Sure.
data center. I'm sure there are such
Okay.
things, but government.
Okay. I would love to learn more, and I don't know if this is a now thing, and if it's a y'all thing, but the RFP process, right? Because since this started coming up, because it does sound a lot like what happened. Whoever's fault it is, or whoever said what or didn't say what, not the point, but the end result is commissioner involvement. Sounds like recommendations were created and then provided to Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Powell. And the reason that's alarming to me is because I have an amendment that I was going to bring up that I talked to everybody, but I feel uncomfortable now because it seems like the amendment is about helping create more oversight so that as part of the process of the feasibility study, there could be more insight or more insight offered by commissioners and others involved. But it feels like that wasn't heeded before for whatever reason by whoever. So I feel not confident now. It sounds like someone's got a response. Okay.
If I can, Mr. Chair. First of all, I think we acknowledge the oversight and are very much supportive of the amendment that you have put together. I think the conversation here today really indicated the need to widen this conversation to include more voices and more thoughts. As it relates to the bid evaluation process, it is very much driven by the purchasing policies and procedures of the county, which were adopted by this Board of Commissioners. And so as they move forward and they conduct these bids, they can't just arbitrarily choose which projects they're going to apply certain factors to. So I think this is a very good conversation to have and to bring in Sean Carlson and Scott Guzzi and talk about the board's ideas and direction they would like to take us in terms of amending the purchasing policy to include those factors and include those voices that the chairman mentioned. All very good points, but we are at a point now where we're really just looking at, do we appropriate money for an architect that was selected by, at a bid evaluation process that was in conformance with our purchasing policy, but clearly an oversight was made in the implementation and with including voices from the commissioners, Board of Commissioners. As far as the administration is concerned, we will definitely be on top of this should you decide to move forward and with your amendment to ensure those voices are heard in this next step of the process.
Can I say? Oh.
Yeah, and I'll just give you just point of information for the new commissioners. So if it is, and not saying it's going to go this way or not go this way, if it is turned down, then they will have to reevaluate, and the process could be done the way that the oversight happened. Just so you know, I mean, it can be brought up again if it is turned down. Or if it goes through, then we go through, and then we bring in the executive office, and we can go forward with that. So it can still go forward even if it's turned down, just so you know. Like we can come up with another resolution, have more involvement. So just since you guys are new, I know these commissioners already know that, but
Yeah, I mean, this is, I speak to all commissioners, is like, so we have a resolution before us, brought forth the recommendation, all the things that we've been talking today. Board ultimately, I mean, we're doing two things. We are appropriating the funds, and we're selecting the vendors.
right.
That's what we're doing. And so
Yeah.
either of those two things can be modified. We could appropriate more money, we could appropriate less money, we could actually even change vendors. Now, I mean, not that, it doesn't come without complications, but it's, that it's, I mean, my preference would be able to get to a place that people feel more comfortable with this. I just don't know. I'll just let everyone know. I can't support this at this time, but I don't think there's anyone who knows that I wasn't going to.
Commissioner.
I have been thinking through amendments that could be added to this resolution that could get me to a place that I could at least hold my nose.
So Commissioner Cavell.
Thanks, yeah. So then, also in the conversation, someone said that there was a study done about this fairly recently. Did I hear that right? Yeah, like a, maybe. There was a feasibility study done, whether it was on the EOC or the dispatch or.
You mentioned one a few years ago.
Yeah, there was one, I believe, was there one that, for the training center that the sheriffs had?
Oh, with the previous administration, many years ago, we submitted to them some drawings, et cetera. Sheriff's been asking for this for 15 years. So the previous administration, I don't know if you'd call it a feasibility study, but there was documents and things that were submitted to the previous administration regarding the EOC, the dispatch, and the training facility.
Okay. And that was that will be part of this conversation with these architects if this is approved?
I don't think so, sir. This is 10 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, and also just credit where credit is due, I want to say, Ed, I'm looking forward to our talk on Monday about procurement and purchasing that you arranged with me a couple of weeks ago, so I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Sorry you feel beat up, but.
Yeah, no, I don't.
That's his job.
Yeah, no, I don't feel
Great
bad,
job,
but yeah, yeah.
Thank you for,
Yeah,
being.
of course, yeah, I look forward to it as well.
Okay.
Okay. I have a couple questions. I have a slew of questions, actually.
Slew?
Yes. So the question for me, can this building be one building potentially? Just potentially, can it be one?
Can I answer beyond yes and no?
Yeah,
So-
well, I know-
So of course, yes, right?
Yeah.
Physically, it's possible, but without doing the feasibility study, just very high level, we don't think it is economical to do it that way because the requirements for the EOC and 911 center, as far as a hardened building, are much more than the training center would be. So to take, instead of building a 75,000 square foot building that's hardened to meet those requirements, and then building an 80,000 square foot that would have less requirements, which of course would be cheaper, we combine them, and now the whole 155,000 square feet has to be completely hardened, which is really going to escalate the price.
Okay, just ask because when I did get elected, the first time we met with the sheriff, under sheriff, and it was said that this was already in the works, but the dispatch center needs to be underground so it can sustain any kind of attack or anything.
Not necessarily underground, but to meet, that was recommended to meet
Right.
standards, to being hard.
Right.
If you remember, in 1972, when the jail opened.
I wasn't born yet.
I know.
I don't remember.
Our dispatch and our EOC were underground. So way back when, in the 1960s, when that place was designed, somebody had their act together.
Yeah.
Before even standards were in place to make sure it was in a hardened place. If a Category 5 tornado
Yeah.
came through, our dispatch and EOC would still operate.
And that's why I asked, because that's what was mentioned, like it should be underground because it's
I can tell
vulnerable
you
right
this,
now.
When the animal control or the animal control center was built, whatever we call it now, there was a study done to put dispatch underneath that facility, and it went out the window because the water table was too high, so that got
I
mixed.
mean, that would be perfect because the dispatchers should get a break, walk the animals, right? I mean, it's like a dual purpose.
Well, the water table put an end to it.
You'll make them happy, right? Because I know dispatchers, they don't have a great job. It's probably the
very
worst job out there, right?
Yes, sir.
So the cost,
appreciate 'em.
so the cost for the water table did kind of break the deal there, as well as we would have had to harden the actual animal shelter.
Right.
Yes, so
Okay.
that cost also,
Yeah, that was just a
Mix
good
it in.
question because it was
Yep.
introduced to me when I first got elected, right?
Yep.
And then, so will there also, if this goes forward and we potentially go with a new building or buildings, will there be a study on what to do with the existing buildings that are going to be vacated?
yes, and I believe that
I'd
is.
recommend you bulldoze them, but that's just me.
Yeah, and that's likely. I don't want to say that that's the plan, but one of the studies that we're engaged in right now with Plant Moran, the CIP study, is going to help evaluate that. Again, that they're looking at all the departments, the size, our remote working conditions now, and this is one of the potential things that could impact that. So yes.
So if they're bulldozed, as the undersheriff says, which I appreciate, that's my work, right? And my other job is, but could you actually potentially put a building there that we're talking about instead of using space like acreage that's open space?
So we could possibly, and that will be one of the things that we look at, but again, keeping in mind the size, right? So, if you look at the handful of buildings that potentially could be bulldozed, if we can downsize or or whatever it may be, these are very big facilities. If you look at the animal care center, again, that's a fairly big footprint, right? I mean, the footprint of the animal care center is 43,000 square feet. That's a square mile. That's right? What is a square mile? 43,560 square feet or something. It's like a square mile of space. Just one of these facilities by themselves is almost double that. So to tear down any of our existing buildings, unless we want to look at tearing down the building that we're in, might be tough. But not to say we won't look at it.
Yeah, that's always a question, because if like as you say, the studies that maybe downsizing, because a lot of remote working, if there's another building that may not be a sheriff-occupied building, but another Oakland County building that was going to potentially lower in individuals, right, employees, that if there's two buildings close together, right?
Adjacent to each other, correct.
Yeah.
Yep, good point.
All right.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
We also have a lot of parking lots that don't have cars in them, So built infrastructure holistically is what we should be looking at as an alternative to open space.
Yep.
Right.
And I'll just note, though, too, that, we can look at parking, but, there are also ordinances that require
sure.
a certain number of spaces per potential
Yes.
occupant, so we're a little restricted there.
I understand.
Okay.
The retrofit equipment that was brought up, that was in these different buildings, can some of that be used for this potential new buildings? Can it be reused?
If you're talking about what we have out at
The training center or wherever you've done, yeah.
That equipment would come
Okay.
into the new building, yes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at cost savings,
Oh, absolutely.
looking at it all.
We wouldn't throw it
It's how
away.
my mind works, right? And then, so this one has to do with Brandon Township. Would there be any impact to Brandon Township if we pull out of there? Seeing that there's, the deputies are there, they shop there, they coffee, whatever they do there, and is it, if I understand, it's privately owned, right? So it wouldn't impact
Yes,
the.
it's a yes, sir. It's a
Okay.
developer that bought that. It's the old high school, then became the middle school, and then they built a new high school and a middle school. So the answer to your question is, his plans were originally, he's going to turn that into a community center to service the community. So we were kind of like a stopgap measure where, he can get some income from a building he isn't able to convert to community center yet, and then he will ultimately. So the impact for him or the community, there really wouldn't be any impact financially in terms of, going to coffee shops and restaurants and stuff.
Right. I just didn't want to get any bad, like any bad blood with we pulling out, then they got this building just sitting there,
No,
right?
sir, that would not.
Yeah.
But if I could
Commissioner Spitz,
add to
yeah.
that. How long is our lease on that facility?
What is it?
It's 3 years right now, and then
And
with
then
two.
Two-year options for
Okay.
extension. So, by the time we make this decision, get the feasibility study, and actually build something, you'll be at the end of that.
Okay.
I mean, we
Yeah, I was just
should be
checking.
realistic.
I always look at, the impact
sir.
of other communities if we're a revenue stream for them too, right?
My guess is they're gonna be scrambling for another facility if we don't make a decision.
All right. So this has to do with the outdoor range. Is there any possibility we can use one of our parks that's heavily wooded for an outdoor range?
I defer to you. I don't know if the parks are around.
Well, I'm just, Kensington has
Thrilled about that,
Kensington
but-
has that one that's outdoors, right? That one that's out there. I don't know if it's allowed or not allowed, or,
Yeah, Ball Mountain.
That's
Kensington
something-
or Island Lake?
well, Island Lake,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Ball Mountain.
That's something that, based off of what we were told to look to try to develop and to fit into the site here, I mean, that's something that we'd have to get with the subject matter experts as far as the range builders go, to see if that's something that we could do.
Okay.
I can tell you this, that, building ranges is not real popular with a lot of communities. I don't know if you
Right.
remember, many years ago in the city of Troy, they were going to put a range in behind the police department, and they had a huge berm wall there, and the residents came unglued, and it never got built.
Yeah.
Indoors.
Well, it is, but
Year round in Michigan.
outdoors is nice for the elements that you get the wind, you get,
Oh,
'cause
yeah, it
accuracy,
It is,
right?
Most definitely. But as Commissioner Spitz said, the ability to train year-round,
Yeah.
that increases the amount of training you can do.
That's why we do winter training, summer training, right?
Yes, sir.
Seasonal training, we're in Michigan,
Yes, sir, we have.
right?
I'd be really hard-pressed to support putting a gun range in any one of the Oakland County parks. I don't think I could
It was
ever
just a
support
question.
that. I'm
Just-
sorry.
Just a question. And then to speak it, to piggyback on Commissioner Markham, we have a lot of parking space that potentially isn't used. And I do understand that we have to have some certain amount of handicap
Ordinances
spaces
and stuff,
per,
yeah.
per square footage of building. But how come we haven't built a skid pad, on location here at all? Just a question, I'm just curious.
Well, I said the money to do it, number one, and the space to do it.
Okay.
So, and we don't even know if it's feasible here.
Just think Kenmore.
I've been there. Yeah.
For years, we used the Pine Knob parking lot, then we used the mall parking lot, but that's being developed into a high-tech center, so that's going to be
Okay.
off the, in fact, that's all been torn up, as you've seen, it's been demolished. And currently, we're renting Schoolcraft, the police academy at Schoolcraft College, which is down in Livonia.
All right. And then just to make this clear, and I know this answer already, but this does not lock us into any construction contracts. That RFP will go out later. Correct? Okay. And then let's see, do we do a evaluation of each building, of the sheriff's buildings? Have we evaluated them, of where they're at code-wise, or upgrades, or what have you?
Existing buildings?
Yeah.
So, yes, right, we have different evaluations. In our capital improvement program, we have lines for multiple things that include ADA, safety, just condition of the building. So we are doing constant assessments of all of our facilities to identify what improvements we need to make and what those costs may be so that we can plan for them in the capital improvement. And then, of course, as part of this feasibility study, that, the team will be evaluating what their current conditions are to help them with the plan moving forward.
All right. And then this one I have is, we talked about average square footage. And I know Commissioner Chairman Woodward brought up Davis-Bacon prevailing wage. Is there a potential to do an average between, so we get like the middle, right? We're not going lowest, we're not going highest, we're going the middle. So average instead of like, as you say, lowest bidder type deal. Is that a potential we can do?
Yes, and I think typically that's how square foot numbers are generated. It's been a moving target lately, right, with COVID, but in general, in the past, when we have construction managers and architects help us with cost estimates, knowing that it is a right-to-work state and we don't have the option to mandate prevailing wage, we do find on average that the bids and the subcontractors that we get, it's right around half, like half are union, half are not. And I think because of that, that square foot number that they use is just like you're referring to.
And I appreciate that. And that leads me into, so the numbers could change potentially next year, or say we get this feasibility plan, we're not going to build it tomorrow, right? So the numbers could potentially change because the material cost goes down potentially, right? So we could save a ton of money.
You're optimistic.
I am very optimistic, yes.
My question was, what are you going to do as they go up?
Right.
So typically, if there's an anticipated shovel in the ground date, there is an inflation number added to that. But you're right. It could go down because of what we're experiencing with material and labor.
Right.
It's a bit of a guessing game where we just really have to rely on the experts that are in the field every day trying to get a sense of it themselves.
Yeah, and I'm with you because, you see like a sheet of plywood went down 30% one time, then it goes up, it goes down. I mean, it's all over the map, right? Commissioner Spiz, you had a...
I was just going to make a comment to that. That's why we'll go out for an RFP before construction.
Right.
To get a firm number. We'll have a ballpark, which I'm assuming they'll add a contingency number in anyway, probably 15 to 20% like everybody
Hopefully.
else.
Yeah,
So
and that's what I was going to
we'll be in
mention.
the ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah, the contingency will help with that. And like you said, before this thing can be built, right, we're coming back to you with hard numbers.
Yeah.
From construction managers who have bid all the sub-trades and what those dollar amounts are. And once we enter into contract with them, if things fluctuate, they're bound to the terms of that contract.
I appreciate it. That's all I have right now. I just want to take a 5-minute break to make sure we get all the other commissioners back so they can have their input.
Okay.
If they have any other
Be
questions.
nice, my
So-
seat's on fire right now.
Yeah.
Cool my butt.
A couple of
They didn't tell us what time they were coming. They said between like 12 and 5.
Trying to,
That's why I keep looking at my phone.
Ready?
Sure, I'm communicating.
all right, we'll reconvene the Economic Development Infrastructure Committee. Is it 1:15? It was extended 5 minutes. Call the roll, please.
Exponential.
Charles?
Present.
Wypert?
Here.
Markham?
Here.
Cavell?
Here.
Spiz?
Present.
Woodward?
Yeah, here.
Miller?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So I believe we have amendment introduced
We have a
by
way forward, so I will move.
Commissioner
I will move the
Woodward.
amendment, yep.
Moved by Commissioner Woodward, supported by Commissioner Wiper. And then we got our discussion down here.
If I can, Mr. Chair, there's just a few
Mr. Ward.
typo issues here from my sloppy work. The first whereas there is duplicated in the second whereas. If you could just delete that one.
First one.
Yeah, delete the
Right,
first
and
one.
it's- grammatically, we changed the word did to was.
Was, yeah, thank you.
So the first one,
I've got to go to remedial grammar. Yeah, so, yeah, Board of Commissioners was not invited to participate, as stated there. The rest of this, goes through, we're going to continue with the plan to appropriate, in that the Board of Commissioners shall perform a critical analysis of the bid responses for the RFP and the evaluations utilized to recommend the lowest qualified bidder, and that the Board of Commissioners shall be afforded participation in the process as required by the resolution as was discussed here today. Again, so moving forward, just some moving language around by continuing the appropriation. And then if you go to the last page there, here further resolve the study group of the board consisting of 2 members of the majority, 1 member of the minority shall conduct a critical review of the bid evaluation process, factors and recommendations of the bid award. Following this, I'm sorry?
Got it.
Following this review, the study group shall report to the board a recommendation to, A, proceed with the recommendation as presented, or proceed with the recommendation with amendment, or conduct a new RFP and bid evaluation process. And then finally, the funds may not be expended from this appropriation until the study group issues its recommendations and the Board of Commissioners approves the selection of a qualified bidder.
Commissioner Spiz.
Just a request for our discussion, we're going to add a time frame in there, 4 to 6 weeks, for that study group to meet and come to a resolution. So can we make that a friendly amendment? To the
Friendly.
amendment?
Excuse me, I like the friendly amendment.
Timeline perspective.
What was the timeline? I'm
4
sorry.
to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks is reasonable, yes, I believe.
All right.
Should follow a critical analysis of.
Where we-
And I'm sorry, where does it
We haven't got that far yet.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly.
So I think that would be in the resolve clause.
Or you can shall report, the board,
Recommended.
board on recommendation.
So report to the Board of Commissioners.
Is it better to pick a date?
We can do, I can do either or.
Let's pick a date. Instead of something 4 to 6.
The Board of Recommendations by
September 15th,
October 1st.
September 15th? Yes, 6 weeks.
October 1st, perhaps because of Labor Day. Okay, scratch that.
September 21st is an Earth, Wind, and Fire song, so maybe.
It's Peace Day.
There you go.
Let's do it, September 21st.
The board.
September 21st.
Hold on.
Do we have a meeting then?
Let's do
We have to meet by the special committee.
special committee come back
Or
with
study
a
group, yeah.
recommendation, or one of these 3 things by that date.
I mean,
We have a meeting, we have a meeting on
after the
September
recommendation.
15th.
Yeah, September
Which is
15th,
6
like
weeks.
the day of the
Say
meeting.
September
Yeah.
17th, which is a Friday. It's an end of the
So
week.
the report comes back by the 17th. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just after the word recommendation and that resolve clause?
Yep.
By
Okay.
September 17th.
2021.
And then, who's the appointment of the members? It doesn't state that in here.
I'll make the appointments.
Okay, just want to make
For
sure
our
it's
board
clear,
members, yeah.
yes.
Yep. report.
All right. Any other discussion?
like I say, one thing is, I know that we have like the amount set as it currently exists. Should we round that out to 1.5 million or?
I mean, the appropriation is the appropriate, I mean, if you want to.
Yeah, my preference would make it, let's make it 1.5 million.
Okay.
And pull the appropriate adjustment out of this other fund I didn't know we had. No.
Okay.
What is the fund balance? I assume public safety facility planning has an extra 91,000 in it for right now.
I'm sure we do. I don't know if anyone from fiscal services is still dialed in, but I know if we want to get into the nuts and bolts of the funding for this and where the additional could come from,
Yeah.
they'd be better to answer that.
We can always change it.
We can always change it on the floor. So for now, we'll just pull it from there, and we can change it on the floor if we have to.
So changing 1.4 to 1.5.
1.5, and then the equivalent adjustment. Exact number. No, less than-
GL account 383484.
Yeah, no, it counts the same and everything. One second, sorry. It's all for device.
While you're figuring out, do we want to add Charlie's amendment to this?
That sounds like.
Or I should say Commissioner Cabal, I apologize.
After we
You're all
do-
right.
Yeah, let's do this amendment, then we
All
can.
right. Well, I just figured if we want to do it all in one.
Do we need to?
Yeah, it looks like it's kind of addressed in the.
Covered?
Yeah.
I just
good
want to make
looking
sure
out,
with
though,
your,
yeah.
you're good, yeah.
That's a good point, though. It feels as though this is covered. Dave, Chris, any feedback on that?
Would you say that, Mr. Ward? Heavy on the mister?
Well, I mean, I think that there are, I think that amendment spoke more going forward, but I
Yeah.
think that can be taken up when a actual award is, happens.
Okay.
Because this is the appropriation, not the actual. Okay, so this happens later.
Thank you.
But good looking out, Chair. Thank you.
No problem. I got your back. You get the number?
What do we do? I mean, I guess it is just taken, I mean, it just works out perfectly. This is 500,000. That's right, because there was already $1 million in there.
I know what these.
No, I am a math. I don't know. I got like stumped. I mean, 981 at the end.
All right. So we're good?
yes, Yeah, so we'll just change it to 500,000.
Out of that account.
And then
Okay.
if we need to change that for some reason, we can do that before.
All right.
We get one.
Any other discussion, changes, fixes?
Yeah, if I could just work with the staff to make sure this is all cleaned up.
Very good. Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
So we have,
And we'll see that in finance tomorrow.
Oh,
Fixed
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Okay.
so we have amendment on this resolution with everything with everything you have in hand, right? It's been moved by Commissioner Woodward, it's been seconded by Commissioner Wiper?
Yes. We've got the, the typograph, or the was not dead in September
Yes.
21st, right?
Yep, the changes in September 21st, or 17th, we said, September 17th.
Yep.
And then
Yeah,
took, the whereas was taken out, the duplicate, and the rounded up to 1.5 mil, and then changed the amount to 500,000 from the GL account.
I'll work with this.
383472. All right. Everybody else good and everything?
Yep.
All right, so can we call the roll, please?
On the amendment for number 2, Whitebird,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Cavell,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
It's 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. So now we have to, let's vote again. And we vote on the full
As amended.
as amended. Please call the roll.
Number 2 is amended, Markham,
Yes.
Cavell,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Whitebird.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
You have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiz, and
Yes.
your work on this. I know
Oh,
you've
thank you.
worked before here, and everyone working together to find resolution. All right.
And thank you, everybody from the sheriff's office, for coming and taking your time and,
Yeah.
giving us your knowledge.
All right.
Moving it along.
So now we have new business, or other business, I'm sorry, other business.
This is a very quick one. This is an item, we took up the sponsorship for Arts, Beats, and Eats. Chris, if you're still around here.
He's back there.
So, I'll let Chris, correct me if I'm.
Mr. Ward?
Mr. Ward, I just want to, if I say something wrong, let me know. In conversations with the city of Royal Oak and how they're proceeding, this is the amendment, but I'm going to make a motion to reconsider the Arts, Beats, and Eats sponsorship resolution from last meeting to add an amendment that basically shifts from contract to grant,
Yeah.
and then the appropriate language to be consistent with what Royal Oak is doing moving forward. So I'll make the motion to reconsider that resolution from the last meeting.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Woodward, supported by Commissioner Wiper. We have to,
You can just, all in favor.
You have to vote.
okay, do we do a roll call on that? To reconsider the Arts, Beats, and Eats to change the language, as will be handed out to the commissioners here if it passes.
Okay. On item number 3, Cavell,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Wiper.
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes,
7 yeas, 0 nays.
motion carries, thank you. So now we get the amendment to the Economic Development Board of Commissioners appropriation of American Rescue Plan.
It just amends the last paragraph in the resolution.
Right. Act local fiscal recovery funds for the sponsorship of 2021 Arts, Beats, and Eats Festival in partnership with the City of Royal Oak. And you'll see the fourth further resolved. You'll see the changes. They added the grant in there. Also, the matching sponsorship of the arts is new, and then retracted the sponsorship matching grants.
It shifts from,
And then
this is in consultation with Guidehouse after the
Correct.
conversation with
Yes.
the matching partner. So I'll move that amendment.
It's moved by Commissioner Woodward, supported by Commissioner Wiper. Any discussion?
Just a quick question.
Yep,
just for
Commissioner Spiz.
clarification on What's driving it? It has to do with the ARP money. So-
Yeah, it's rescue plan in the way the Guidehouse is technically asking us to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Rather than a contract for services, do a grant agreement.
And my understanding, it aligns with what Royal Oak's doing, so there isn't any question of we're doing something different than they're doing.
Understand. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Okay, on the amendment as presented, Spiz.
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Charles.
Yes.
Wiper.
Yes.
Markham.
Yes.
Cavell.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes,
7 yeas, 0 nays.
motion carries, thank you. Any other business?
And then the MR as amended?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. And I apologize. Now we have to do the miscellaneous resolution for the Economic Development Board of Commissioners, appropriation of American Rescue Plan, Art Local Fiscal Year Recovery Funds for the sponsorship of 2021 Arts, Beats, and Eats Festival in partnership with the City of Royal Oak.
I move.
Moved by Commissioner Charles, seconded by Commissioner Markham. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Okay. Resolution as amended, Woodward,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Wiper,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Cavell,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes,
7 yeas, 0 nays.
motion carries. Thank you. Any other business?
Wouldn't have thought that we'd just get a unanimous vote, so.
Hearing
Starting out this
no other
meeting today.
business, we'll call the meeting closed at 1:29.
Excellent. Good job.